you're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include speak no evil, hear no evil, and see no evil.
Wrong!
It's the wrong podcast, but we'll make it right. Spinning the world in a whole new light. Winning wild and a little askew. And the one who's right, it might be you. It might be you.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1! Smells like McNuggets. Here's a fun fact. Actually, there's 2 fun facts. First fun fact is that there's no reason to call them fun. All facts are fun. It's redundant to say fun fact. All facts are fun. I love trivia. As a result of me loving trivia, I was once on a game show. I was on Win Ben Stein's Money. And this is many, many years ago. I have all this useless information. I thought, why not earn some money for it? So I went on the game show, and people always ask me, how'd you do? And I always tell them, I had a great time. I was the first person eliminated, so I couldn't keep going. And what you need to know about game shows like Jeopardy or Win Ben Stein's Money or, I don't know, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, is that the test to get on the show is actually more difficult than the show. And most of the people on the show know the answers to all the questions that are being asked. They know most of the questions to the answers being asked. Oh, I fell into a Jeopardy trap there. They know most of the answers to the questions being asked. And the trick was buzzing in on time. I couldn't buzz in at the right time. You had to wait until the question was done being read. If you buzzed in early, you got locked out. And I was the first one eliminated. And Ben Stein took my place and he competed against people. And I wish I had the video. I know I have the video somewhere, but I cannot find it. I tried to look for it so I can include an audio clip. But what's significant about my appearance on Win Ben Stein's Money was that Ben was enthralled with me. He was so fascinated with me because my fun fact about myself was that I know how to sniff out a cobra's nest. As I've probably mentioned before, I grew up in the Philippines. And at some point, we were exploring caves, and somebody said, do you smell that? That's the smell of cobra excrement, and you need to keep your eyes open. And so I learned what that smell was and what that meant. And what's ironic about this is that I have a terrible sense of smell now. My sense of smell is 10, 15% of what your sense of smell is. Which, if you're going to lose a sense, this is the one to lose. There's very little downside me having a poor sense of smell. But the co-host of Win Ben Stein's Money was Jimmy Kimmel. And Jimmy, he laughed about this too, and he told a joke about, oh, it smells like the Cobras ate McNuggets tonight, or something like that. And I loved Jimmy Kimmel at the time. He was on a radio station here in the Los Angeles area, and he was the sports guy, and he provided a good deal of the comedy on the show. And one moment in particular, and I made sure to mention it to him when I saw him, was that they had McDonald's breakfast brought in, and I don't know if you remember, but the bacon used to be in a swirl. It was like a cinnamon bun bacon thing. It was just bacon, but they somehow swirled it. And he took the bacon out of his breakfast sandwich and tacked it to a bulletin board with a note that said, I will eat this 1 year from today. And the year passed, and the day came when he needed to eat the bacon. And him eating that bacon on air was one of the funniest things I could ever imagine on the radio. And I told him, I almost got into a car accident from laughing so hard over you eating that bacon. And he said, well, my family was not very happy with me for that. So that's my Jimmy Kimmel story. I wish I had this video to show you. If I can find it, I will let you all know. Maybe you have hours and hours of Win Ben Stein's money taped somewhere, and you could find me. Issue number 2! Not that! Recently, Pam Bondi, she's the Attorney General of the United States. She is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the federal government. She went on a podcast to talk about the dangers of hate speech and how we in the United States were no longer going to tolerate hate speech. Free speech was one thing, but hate speech is quite another.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
This is nuts. This makes sense. This totally makes sense to almost everybody on first blush. Of course, yes, we value free speech. Say whatever you want, as long as it's not hateful. Problem is that the federal government could call anything it wants hate speech. You criticize the president, hey, that's hate speech, and we're going to throw you in jail for it because you're being hateful. And the law has been argued and argued and argued over, and it's very clear in our law and in our precedents that hate speech is protected. Hate speech is free. And it's fine. It is fine. I'll say it one more time. It is fine for people to confuse this and not know this. Unless you're the Attorney General of the United States. Unless you've been to law school. Unless you're the person who gets to decide who gets arrested over speech violations for the entire country. This is totally unacceptable. She, of all people, should know, she apparently doesn't, but she should know that hate speech is protected speech. You can say almost anything, and the government can't do anything to you about it. Now, there might be consequences. There might be practical civil consequences. People may not like you anymore. People may not shop at your business anymore. But the government is not going to get involved in defining what is hateful or not. You are free to say whatever you want. Then she went on to say, in another interview, I believe it was on Fox News, that, here's the clip.
That's horrific. It's free speech, but you shouldn't be employed anywhere if you're going to say that. And employers, you have an obligation to get rid of people. You need to look at people who are saying horrible things, and they shouldn't be working with you. Businesses cannot discriminate. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately, that Office Depot had done that. We're looking at that.
This is also bonkers. She is nominated by a Republican president. I just did an episode, I don't know, a year or two ago about 303 Creative and Masterpiece Cake Shop and how the Supreme Court had clearly said that nobody can be compelled to say anything they don't want to say. That's part of the First Amendment. It's not just that you can say whatever you want. It's that nobody can compel you to say something you don't want. And so the 303 Creative site, it's a website business and Masterpiece Cake Shop. They sell cakes. They have to serve everybody. They cannot discriminate based on who's coming to them for business. So you go into the cake shop, they've got to sell you a cupcake. They've got to sell you a cake, no matter who you are, or what religion you believe. What you can't force them to do is say something they don't want to say. You can't force them to write something on the cake. You can't force them to make a website for something that they don't believe in. They can say no over what's being said. And that includes printing posters with Charlie Kirk's image on them. Totally understandable if somebody doesn't understand this, unless you're the Attorney General of the United States of America. Just bonkers she doesn't get this. And of course, everybody, well, not of course, it was nice to see all the right-wing pundits come out and say, what is she even talking about? Does she even understand the law at all? Because it's been a major right-wing victory. It's been a major conservative victory to get this clearly defined by the Supreme Court. And then Jimmy Kimmel goes on a show and he says this about the shooter of, about the man who killed Charlie Kirk.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, Jimmy Kimmel has been indefinitely suspended over this, and the chairman of the FCC, the government commission that oversees broadcasting, went out and clearly said this was not okay, what he said was not okay, and what he said was not okay. We should be upset about it. It's fine if you're upset about this. If you feel smeared or you feel he's smearing somebody else, that's fine. You can feel that way. You can be upset. You can complain to your local ABC affiliate about it. You can choose never to watch Jimmy Kimmel's show again, which apparently is something 99% of the population has already decided to do. But it's another thing altogether for the government, the FCC in particular, to say this is not okay, we're not going to allow this, and to put pressure on Jimmy Kimmel's employers and all the networks and affiliates and the stations across the country to tell them that, hey, you've got this big merger coming up. Well, if you want to merge, well, we're going to need you to fire Jimmy Kimmel. That's a violation of the First Amendment. The government doesn't get to say what Jimmy Kimmel says. He's got a comedy show. He's allowed to make jokes that are bad, that are offensive, that fall flat, that might be exaggerated or hyperbolic. He's allowed to do that. He's allowed to be one-sided. We used to have this thing called the Fairness Doctrine. And the Fairness Doctrine said you had to be equal. If you have somebody from the Republican side on, you have to have somebody from the Democratic side on. And it was ruled unconstitutional. You don't have to do that. And I remember Democrats talking about how we needed to bring back the Fairness Doctrine, and they were doing it in a way to get Rush Limbaugh off the air. They didn't think it was fair that Rush Limbaugh and all of his copycats were taking all of this airtime on AM radio, and they wanted alternative voices to the conservative radio that was all over the place. And they said, well, let's bring back the Fairness Doctrine and force them to have left-wing people on. And it did not go anywhere. Rush Limbaugh, of course, pilloried them for this. I remember the Salem Media Group in particular. They own stations here in the Los Angeles area. I remember the radio stations playing ads about how awful it is that these Democrats, these liberals, these progressives were trying to tell them what they had to have on their radio stations. Well, now the Salem Media Group is forcing Jimmy Kimmel off because they want to make this merger, and the FCC is telling him, hey, you better take care of him. And then the FCC goes even further and says, we're not done yet. There's other people we're looking at. And Donald Trump comes out and says, yep, and we're going to get Jimmy Kimmel and we're going to get Seth Meyers off of NBC right away. I'm sure something about Saturday Night Live and The View is coming out very shortly. And here's a real tragedy for you. The tragedy is when the worst person in the world you know makes a good point. And that is, for me, Ted Cruz. There's a lot that Ted Cruz and I probably agree about, but just on a personality level, it's like, what's that Dr. Seuss line, the seasick crocodile? That's how Ted Cruz feels to me. He's icky to me. I'm not a fan. He says things that I think are, how do I put this, intellectually dishonest at times. Well, here's what Ted Cruz has to say about the FCC and the First Amendment, and I have to say, bravo, Ted.
No. Look, I like Brendan Carr. He's a good guy. He's the chairman of the FCC. I work closely with him. But what he said there is dangerous as hell.
For people that are listening, because this is going to be, quote, controversial, so I want to make sure we explain it clearly. When you say no and it's dangerous, explain and run this out, the slippery slope that this can open, so that people understand why we're saying it.
So the Federal Communication Commission is in charge of granting broadcast licenses. So ABC, NBC, CBS, they have licenses from the FCC. It is true that under statute, they're required to be in the public interest.
Yep.
What he is saying is Jimmy Kimmel was lying. That's true. He was lying. And his lying to the American people is not in the public interest. And so he threatens explicitly, we're going to cancel ABC's license. We're going to take him off the air so ABC cannot broadcast anymore. And I got to say, he threatens it. He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And I got to say, look, I understand. Jimmy Kimmel has mocked me so many times I cannot count. The corporate media, they are dishonest. They are liars. I hate what Jimmy Kimmel said. I am thrilled that he was fired. But let me tell you, if the government gets in the business of saying, we don't like what you, the media, have said, we're going to ban you from the airwaves if you don't say what we like, that will end up bad for conservatives. It reminds me of, you and I are both fans of The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
J.R.R. Tolkien. It reminds me of like the Ring of Power. And it is so attractive. It's sort of like conservatives are saying, wait, if we have government, we have power. Yeah. We can ban the media. Let me tell you what will happen. Going down this road, there will come a time when a Democrat wins again. Wins the White House.
They will get rid of every Democrat talk show host in America that's a conservative. They'll get rid of every podcast. They'll get rid of everybody on YouTube.
They will silence us. They will use this power, and they will use it ruthlessly. I think it is unbelievably dangerous for government to put itself in the position of saying, we're going to decide what speech we like and what we don't, and we're going to threaten to take you off air if we don't like what you're saying. And it might feel good right now to threaten Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah.
But when it is used to silence every conservative in America, we will regret it. And so, again, I like Brendan Carr, but we should not be in this business.
Hey, it's time. What are the rules?
Oh, what are the rules? What are the rules? Don't touch my fries or my garden tools. Oh, what are the rules?
I pulled into a gas station the other day, and let me draw out a gas station for you. There are usually 2 pumps. You know, if you go to Costco, there's like, 6 to 8. But most gas stations have 2 pumps, and we'll call the first pump in the line pump number 1. And the second one, well, let's call that pump B. And this car was in pump B. And so I was having to wait, and it was taking them a long time to fill up. I don't know what was taking them so long, but pump number 1 was open, and they were at pump B, and I couldn't do anything. So I got frustrated, and I saw that the 2 pumps on the other side were open. So I flipped around. I did a loop in the gas station, which, as you know, if you're a driver, probably one of the most awkward things to do while you're driving is trying to loop around in a gas station. So I'm looping around, and as I'm looping around, this car comes in off the street and zips in to the side of the pumps that I want to go for. And guess which pump they decided to stop at? That's right, pump B. And the guy gets out of the car and runs into the gas station to pay for it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, sorry, didn't move forward. I got to wait again. Eventually, I see another pump open up, and I'm not looping around this time. I'm back into this pump, as awkward and awful as that is, in the worst sort of parallel parking manner you can imagine. But here's the rule. You see two open pumps? You pull all the way forward. Please, just pull all the way forward. Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@thewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, thewrongpodcast.com. And help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. Oh, I was wrong.
In my last episode, I believe the episode was called It's Okay. Listener Drew wrote in to tell us about how great it is to take his shoes off on the plane as a means of trolling me. And my 9-year-old daughter was listening to the podcast because she's so cool like that. No, I was forcing her to listen to it. And she heard Drew talk about taking his shoes off, and this is what my daughter had to say about taking your shoes off on the airplane. The controversy lives on.
Well, I think you should take your shoes off if you, right before you got to the airport, you washed your feet, you have clean socks, and you have clean shoes, and you haven't been walking around for a really long time.
Listener Chrissy, she let me know that she had a truly laugh out loud moment as I talked about That's Okay Guy. Speaking of That's Okay Guy, right after releasing this episode, I texted my friend Brandon about a football game that he actually was recording. And I didn't give anything away. And I got after him for checking his text messages when he's recording a game. That's the first rule about recording a game, is you don't check your phone. You go into a digital cave. You try to silo yourself off. So I sent him the recording of the episode. I said, you will need to listen to this section of the episode because it will be very relevant to you. So he listened to it and he immediately responded back, Wendy is wrong and she's That's Okay Guy. Issue number 3. It's complicated. The major news over the last 2 weeks has been the death of Charlie Kirk. He was assassinated in Utah. I don't know anybody who doesn't think it's awful. It's plain awful. Fortunately, everybody I know has said it's awful. I know you can find people saying it's great and they're laughing about it. And finding somebody on the internet who's saying something stupid is literally the easiest thing to do. Type in any subject and you can find somebody on Twitter saying something ridiculous about it. Even the tragic death of a young man. I have a friend. They are not particularly political, and they didn't know a lot about Charlie Kirk. And they said, hey, I went on his Instagram feed this morning, and he is not the person that I see being praised on social media. And I agree that is exactly right. Despite his tragic death, some of the praise for Charlie Kirk and his politics and his presentation, there's a disconnect for me as well. And I think my first thought about Charlie Kirk and his legacy is that he was a bad representative of conservatism and an even worse representative of Christianity. And saying that is going to trigger an awful lot of people. An awful lot of people who might be even listening to the show and be like, what are you talking about? That's awful. How dare you say that? He was the best representative of conservatism, and he was a wonderful Christian man. And the truth is that it's somewhere in between those two things, in between my first impression and their view and their memory of Charlie Kirk. It is somewhere in between. Just to recap his life and his legacy a little bit, Charlie Kirk was a savant. He was a political activism savant. And when he was 18, he dropped out of college because some conservative activists found him. They heard him. They liked him. They're like, we need more young men like you. Let's give you lots of money. You go create more young people like you. And so he drops out of college. He had major success, major success. Made millions and millions of dollars. I don't know. His organization, Turning Point USA, might have $100 million or something like that. Ridiculous amounts of money. He's a well-known person. Everybody knows his name now for sure. And the people that were backing him, most of them split with him. And they split with him for one reason. And that one reason is named Donald Trump. They all said, this guy is, concerning Donald Trump, this guy is not a conservative. He's not what we want. He doesn't represent us. We're not going to promote him. And Charlie Kirk saw an opportunity. A lot of media pundits backed out of the space. They left this massive void for anybody to walk into to say that Donald Trump is great and that we need to support him and his agenda is excellent and this is absolutely where the country needs to go. That void had to be filled, and Charlie Kirk filled it. There's lots of other people that filled it as well, but Charlie Kirk was one of the biggest names to do so. And in my estimation, polarization is tearing our country apart. It's our biggest problem. It is the biggest problem in our country today, bigger than homelessness or healthcare or taxes or climate change, whatever you might come up with. I think polarization is the worst problem. Polarization was going to exist without Donald Trump or Charlie Kirk, but those two guys made it worse. They leaned into it, and they leaned into it hard, and they got successful because of it. And it will not be hard to go find a video online somewhere that's titled, "Watch Charlie Kirk absolutely destroy this lib over DEI," or "Watch Charlie Kirk destroy this person over this or that." And as a general rule, my rule is if something is titled, "Watch so-and-so destroy so-and-so," I will not watch it. I will not feed that beast. We should not be destroying one another. I'm all for advocating for your position. I'm all for engaging with controversial subjects and debating people that disagree with you. But it should not be to destroy someone else. By all means, destroy bad ideas, but not people. And there are all kinds of videos of Charlie Kirk destroying other people. And he never met a straw man he couldn't defeat. A straw man is a logical fallacy where you take the weakest position, the weakest version of what other people might believe, and you tear it down. You tear it down and say, this is what they all believe, this is their strongest argument, and you rip it to shreds. And Charlie would routinely rip straw men I'm going to do it. How am I getting mixed up on the word shreds? He would tear straw men to shreds. And he would go to these college campuses, he would debate with anybody, and he would post on his social media many of the worst advocates for the opposition. And this is easy to do with volume. You talk to enough people, you're going to find enough crazy people where everybody who believes the opposite of you looks crazy if that's all you present on your channel, if that's all you show people. And he had no problem showing people the crazies and how easy it was to defeat them. And he would have these large crowds at college campuses, and people would be hooping and hollering and booing as people said their piece of mind or shared their opinion. And this is not a good form of dialogue or debate. This doesn't bring people on board to your ideas. It doesn't validate or respect the person you're debating. And I get it. He wasn't hooping and hollering himself, but he wasn't necessarily telling people to knock it off. Occasionally he would, but he kind of liked it too. It wasn't so much about changing minds as creating entertainment. And part of his purpose, he would say, was not necessarily to change minds, but to give confidence and courage to people who believed like he did. But I'm not a fan of the format. I'm not a fan of the format at all. There is a lot that I would agree with Charlie Kirk. We're both conservative Christian men, and that means there is a lot that we agreed on. One thing I really, really appreciated about Charlie Kirk was that he would talk to anybody. This is great. I love the public dialogue. He wouldn't tell people they had to go away if they disagreed with him. He'd let them give their piece. He'd put his microphone down so that they could talk. He wouldn't just impulsively talk over them. He went into the most hostile places for his point of view. I don't see a lot of Democrats or progressives doing the same kind of thing, going into the most hostile places and talking to anybody there that is willing to talk to them. He believed that the answer to bad speech was not to cut it off, to cancel it, to prevent it. He thought the answer to bad speech was more speech. And he felt like what he was doing was actually preventing civil war. Now, I have some disagreements with him about his methods and the polarizing nature of his presentation, particularly his social media feed. But I think he's onto something that if we don't talk about this stuff, it's going to bubble up one way or another. And we need to talk about it. We need to get our views out there. We need to sharpen one another so that our views and our opinions get stronger. Not more strongly held, but that our arguments are stronger. We want everybody to be presenting the best argument possible for their point of view. And the only way to really do that is to hear other people talk about what they believe and have them interact with your beliefs. Charlie never backed down from his Christianity. And people love how bold he was about his faith. And I concur. I am happy that he was so bold about his faith. Let me tell you, being bold about your faith at a college campus with college students that hate you and come up to you and scream you down and tell you how awful you are for being a Christian, that's not all that hard. That's pretty easy for most Christians to do. Some people don't want the drama, they don't want the spectacle, but if you can put up with that, it doesn't really impact your faith. It's not a challenge to your faith. It strengthens your faith when other people tell you how awful it is that you believe this thing. And that's not just true of Christianity, that's true of every religion. What's even more impressive than him being bold about his faith in these public events is that he had a lot of donors. A lot of donors loved his politics. He was mostly talking about politics. I totally believe that Christians should be involved in politics and should be talking about politics. And he would have people come to him with money because they loved his politics. And they'd say, hey, here's $1 million check. Here's $1 million. Would you mind not talking about Christianity so much? And Charlie would say, if you don't want me to talk about Christianity, I don't think you want to give your money to me because I'm going to keep talking about it. It's important to me. I think it makes an impact on people. I think it shapes who they are over the long term in profound ways. And I will always talk about my faith. And let me tell you, it is easy to face down somebody who's screaming at you with curse words about your Christianity. It is much more difficult to hold the line when somebody is giving you or wants to give you $1 million check. That's where it's hard to do it. Charlie was passionately and surprisingly compassionate about his pro-life position. He spoke about the need to protect the unborn with clarity. I love that about him. He was passionate about encouraging family formation. He loved his kids. He encouraged young people to get married and have kids. And he was a friend of Israel. And that is not something that's necessarily popular on the far right, which is where he camped out. And he would tell anti-Semites that they weren't welcome, that their views were not part of the movement. And this made many people angry with Charlie Kirk. And there was not a shortage of people claiming that Israel actually killed Charlie Kirk. There's some people, it's true of all of us. Let me just say, it's true of all of us that there's like 4 things on our mind that must be to blame for every problem in the world. And we try to figure out this thing that just happened and who's responsible for it. And we go to our 4 things first. And for some people, it's the Jews. And despite Charlie's persistent defense of Israel and their right to exist, that didn't stop some people from saying, clearly the Jews did this. I was watching this one clip. I couldn't find it again, but he was talking to a young college student who disagreed with him, and the young man was having a difficult time. They were talking about race. The young man was black, and he was tripping on his words a little bit. He was getting a little bit embarrassed, and Charlie said, hey, just slow down, slow down. I'm not here to embarrass you. I know this is hard. This takes a lot of courage to step up in front of all these people to a microphone and express yourself. You're doing great. Like, keep it up. I want to hear from you. Go ahead. Or let me. And then he goes, I think the argument you're trying to make is this. And he presented the young man's argument to him. Great. Fantastic. I love that. It was so counter to the presentation I normally see of Charlie Kirk. I was glad to see he was doing that kind of thing. There are a number of clips and people putting things together. I saw a list of these are the top 10 worst things Charlie Kirk ever said, and these are often unfair. They are their own version of a straw man. They're taken out of context, or they are quote mined. They aren't the quote you hear is actually the opposite of what Charlie was saying. Like, yes, he said those words, but it's missing the important word after that where he goes, that's not what I believe. One example of this was, and it was the first thing that came up after he gets killed by a gun, is this quote.
I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational.
That's a pretty harrowing and ironic quote from somebody who was just killed by a sniper. Here is actually the full context of that quote. And I want you to just tell me, does the quote mean the same thing in the context that you first heard it?
How's it going, Charlie? I'm Austin. I just had a question related to Second Amendment rights. We saw the shooting that happened recently, and a lot of people are upset. But I'm seeing people argue for the other side that they want to take our Second Amendment rights away. How do we convince them that it's important to have the right to defend ourselves and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm a big Second Amendment fan, but I think most politicians are cowards when it comes to defending why we have a Second Amendment. This is why I would not be a good politician, or maybe I would, I don't know, but because I actually speak my mind. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. I love hunting. The Second Amendment is not even about personal defense. That is important. The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Come on.
And if that talk scares you, wow, that's radical, Charlie. I don't know about that. Well, then you have not really read any of the literature of our founding fathers. Yep. Number 2, you've not read any 20th century history. You're just living in Narnia. By the way, if you were actually living in Narnia, you would be wiser than wherever you're living, because C.S. Lewis was really smart. So I don't know what alternative universe you're living in. Yep. You just don't want to face reality that governments tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. And that is part of liberty.
Wow.
Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. Wow. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road. Wow. So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, yes, by having more armed guards in front of schools. Yes. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. Sure. So then how do you reduce? Very simple. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How did we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks. How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows. There's all these guns because everyone's armed. If our money and our sporting events and our airplanes have armed guards, why don't our children?
Now, you can disagree with Charlie about whether or not deaths are worth it. You can disagree with him about whether or not deaths from automobiles are worth it. But he clearly thinks that gun violence needs to be curbed. And he isn't callously saying it's fine for people to die. He is not saying that at all. He's just talking about a cost-benefit analysis. Another thing he said, Paul Pelosi, that's Nancy Pelosi's husband, he was attacked by a lunatic. He was attacked in his home with a hammer, awful attack. He was mocked mercilessly by many on the right, including Donald Trump Jr., over this. People thought it was hilarious that this man was attacked. And again, it is not hard to find people saying stupid things online. And that's a little bit what's frustrating to me about the people who are so upset that they found this awful person praising Charlie Kirk's death. They have no memory or knowledge that people on the right do this too. Here is a quote from Charlie Kirk about Paul Pelosi.
By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out. I bet his bail's like $30,000 or $40,000.
Now that sounds awful. Let me play the whole clip to you. Let me play the whole clip for you. Here's the full context of what he was saying.
I mean, I'm looking at Politico.com. I'm looking at the New York Times. I'm looking at all these places, and there's a little bit of mention here. For example, Politico says top Republicans reject any link between GOP rhetoric and Paul Pelosi assault. Of course you should reject any link. Why is the Republican Party, why is the conservative movement to blame for gay schizophrenic nudists that are hemp jewelry makers breaking into somebody's home, or maybe not breaking into somebody's home? Why are we to blame for that exactly? And why is he still in jail? Why has he not been bailed out? By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out. I bet his bail's like $30,000 or $40,000. Bail him out and then go ask him some questions. I wonder what his bail is. They're going after him with attempted murder, political assassination, all this sort of stuff. I'm not qualifying it. I think it's awful. It's not right. But why is it that in Chicago you're able to commit murder and be out the next day? Why is it that you're able to trespass, second-degree murder, arson, threat of public official, cashless bail? This happens all over San Francisco, but if you go after the Pelosi's, oh, you're let out immediately.
So the larger context, actually, even more than that clip, was he was talking about how criminals are being let out easily, that bail is no longer a thing, that people can walk out. And he was talking about how many people say that the attacker of Paul Pelosi was a right-wing extremist. And he was not a right-wing extremist. He was a crazy person with schizophrenia. And what I hear Charlie saying is, let's get this guy, let's put a microphone in front of this guy. If we have to bail him out in order to do that, let's put a microphone in front of him so that everybody can hear what a lunatic he is and how he's not expressing right-wing views. Now, there's a lot that I disagree with about Charlie Kirk and his politics and his presentation. And there was an article that a friend posted. I was already dreaming up this episode. This article, I will link to it in my show notes. It is excellent. It is the written form of this episode. I didn't steal their content, but it's the same idea. What do we do with this person who some people think is amazing and a great example of Christianity and political engagement, and other people who think he's the devil? What do we make sense of that? Why do people think these things? And there's a term called grifting. Many people are called grifters. A grifter politically is somebody who encourages people to dwell on fear and anger and makes a profit from it. And I think that describes Charlie Kirk. There's a lot that I agree with him about. I also think he's a grifter. I think he got people to focus on their fear and anger. And he made millions of dollars from it. One of the things I, of course, disagree with him about the most is how he bowed to Trump. He neglected his conservative values. Donald Trump is not a conservative. He's somebody who ran for president as a Republican, but he's remade the Republican Party into something that it was not. Conservative principles have been abandoned for I don't know, like many of the things Donald Trump talks about are the same things that Bernie Sanders wants. They're not conservative. They're not Republican. And Charlie Kirk was willing to go along with Donald Trump over and over and over again, despite the abandonment of his own principles, including even over the release of the Epstein client list. Even over that, he was like, I'm just going to trust Trump and his guys to do what's right. I also disagreed with him about COVID and the COVID response. I seriously disagreed with him about the 2020 election and whether or not there was fraud committed. And I disagreed strongly with him over nationalism. I totally believe in patriotism. I reject nationalism. I think nationalism is a dangerous ideology. And what frustrated me when I heard him talk about these things was that he is a very intelligent man. He's very well read. And he would make this argument and leave something out. And I'm watching this going, how can somebody this smart leave out this thing in their argument? The X, how are they leaving it out? How is somebody who clearly knows that X exists, why is he not talking about X or Y? Why is he jumping straight to Z? It would drive me nuts. I'm not going to go in. This episode would be 3 hours long. He had a 11, 12-year career. It would take me too long to go into each and every one of those notions, but those are the high points. I'm going to play a number of clips that I have found from Charlie Kirk that I think are troubling. I don't think they represent the Republican Party well. I think they represent Christianity even worse. I'm going to go through those clips. Let me just say from the get-go, I know this isn't fair. It is not fair to go find all these clips and run them back to back. I know it's not fair. When you want to say, hey, that wasn't fair, remember, I'm the guy telling you it's not fair. But the format, I'm limited to the format. I've got to get this information out in a particular amount of time that my listeners can actually listen to it in. And it isn't any more fair to run all these clips of the negative things he said than it would be to run only a bunch of clips of the positive things he said. Neither of those things is fair. I am doing my best. If you really, really need the context of any of these, please ask me for them. I went through to make sure that they're not quote mined, that they're not taken out of context. But I think it's important that we remember Charlie and remember that this is what he chose to say in certain situations. So there's this thing called the replacement theory, and Charlie believed in the replacement theory. It's the idea that Democrats want to, well, let me just put it in Charlie's own words. Here's the clip.
The Great Replacement Strategy, which is well underway every single day on our southern border, is a strategy to replace white rural America with something different. Show 159, please. 80% of the map is red, but that is only 20% of the American population. They hate that they don't live in big cities. They hate those of you that live in rural and small America. They hate those of you that own land and have guns and believe in a better country. And they have a plan to try and get rid of you. The same way that Joseph Stalin went after the kulaks, they want to go after you. Those of you that live in Mankato, Minnesota. You live in Marshallton, Iowa, Evansville, Indiana, Peoria, Illinois. You're the problem. Didn't you know it? You believe in God, country, family, faith, and freedom. And they won't stop until you and your children and your children's children are eliminated.
As you might remember, there was a lot of controversy about Haitian immigrants eating people's cats and dogs. It wasn't a thing at all. The immigrants were largely legal, brought here to work in a factory that was struggling to find workers. Here's what Charlie had to say about Haitians.
And that does not include the 2 million gotaways. And since those are the border jumpers who avoid border encounters, it's safe to conclude the proportion of convicted criminals is even higher than that, 2 million plus of them. Thank you for being a member, and stay safe in Alabama, and pray Trump wins, or else things are going to get really bad. They're going to get even worse. There will be hundreds of thousands of Haitians brought into Alabama, and they will become your masters.
I noticed more than once when a black man committed a crime, he would make sure to emphasize that the man was black. Just the way he would hit the word black, and he never shied from saying that, from pointing out the person's race. This was a clip it was a clip about a white woman who had been harassed by a group of black men in New York City.
Now, were they trying to hijack her? Were these blacks trying to go rob her? Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more.
And maybe there are groups of young men going around harassing people. I don't know what their melanin level in their skin has to do with it. You could easily say there's groups of men going around harassing people. The melanin in their skin isn't what's causing them to go around harassing people. It's not super relevant. There are loads of groups of black men who are not going around harassing white people intentionally. In fact, most groups of black men are not doing that sort of thing. I doubt that this is happening all the time, as he says. It's not the problem he presents it. And if it is, again, the melanin is not the thing that's really important in the discussion. Along these lines, there is Tucker Carlson, he's also a grifter and somebody who's largely abandoned his principles, I would say, over the last 10 years. He had a producer. This producer was responsible for Tucker's first draft on everything Tucker said online. And this producer was let go because somebody was able to identify him on a chat board. They found a chat board. They were able to connect it to him. And the things he was saying on this chat board were awful. For example, there was a thread titled, "Would you let a jet black Congo N-word do LASIK eye surgery on you for 50% off?" And it says something that he was on a message board where this could be the topic. And he wrote, "I wouldn't get LASIK from an Asian for free, so no." Later on in a different thread, he said, "Black dudes staying inside playing Call of Duty is probably one of the biggest factors keeping crime down." And then he also said, "Honestly, given how tired black people always claim to be, maybe the real crisis is their lack of sleep." And I'll emphasize again, this was not Charlie Kirk saying these things. This was a producer for Tucker Carlson. Fox News found out about these statements that he was making online. They fired him, and Charlie Kirk immediately hired him. Charlie Kirk also, at one point, he wrote on Twitter, "Whiteness is great. Be proud of who you are." He had this advice at one point for native-born Americans.
The break-ins, the looting, the murder, the rapes, the arson. It's just, by the way, this is just getting warmed up. You got 15,000 fighting-age males that are getting deployed all across the country. Native-born Americans, you better buy weapons, everybody. Have a lot of guns at your disposal. I would never leave your home without a weapon. It's the new country we live in. It is Mad Max. Biden is creating Mad Max. You're on your own.
And when it came to President Biden, goodness knows I have lots of disagreements with President Biden. And this is how Charlie Kirk thought that Biden should be treated and handled.
I'll tell you what, she would be a lot easier to beat than Joe Biden. A lot. I mean, Joe Biden is a bumbling, dementia-filled Alzheimer's, corrupt tyrant who should honestly be put in prison and or given the death penalty for his crimes against America.
And while we're talking about executions, let me first say that it has been proven conclusively that stricter punishments do not decrease crime. What actually decreases time is if you can increase how often people get caught. If people know they're going to get caught, they will stop criming. If they think they can get away with it, it doesn't matter how severe you make the crime. They're still gonna crime because they think they can get away with it. Charlie disagrees with me about that. This is what he had to say about executions.
I just looked this up,
yeah.
Charlie. I didn't realize this, Jack. The last time that in Belarus they used capital execution here was in 2019, and it was by firearm.
Yeah, that's how you should. By the way, this is my other problem with death penalty. It takes too long, too many appeals.
Expensive.
It should be public. It should be quick. It should be televised.
Well, this can't be right, can it? The last execution in France was guillotine in 1977.
100% true. They used the guillotine.
Until 77?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
There's videotape of it.
Honestly, that's like what we should be doing. And I agree. It should be public
And
should be
televised.
public square.
By the way, you could
Force
fund the
kids
government
to watch it.
You could have brought to you by Coca-Cola. And no, I'm not kidding. By the way, I would totally tune in to see some pedo get their head chopped off. Convicted by a jury.
By the way,
peers.
that's going to get
No,
caught.
I'm talking about a real thing. I'm not talking
all
about
executions in Belarus are by firearm. That's not a choice or anything.
Andrew's saying don't make kids watch it, and I think no, the absolute
I think
opposite.
at a certain age, it's an initiation.
16, if you can drive, you can watch
but hold
it.
on.
Not
You
even
see,
16.
If
I would
all of a
say-
sudden you look at some of these savages, like in Indiana, there was this guy that went in and killed a pregnant woman and her 3 kids.
Yeah.
And you know what? I want to watch that execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and get him be publicly executed. And I think that would be justice. You think children should have you should see it. What is the age? At what age should you start to see public executions?
16.
I think you could do it earlier. I think you maybe at age 12,
Whenever-
like 6th grade or so. You are a person, they're old enough to, you don't need to like really wallow in it and have them be broken on a wheel or anything. But if it was something like chopping, if we had a guillotine or something.
I think it's the age where they can't be, I think there's too early and you become desensitized to maybe like this. I think it's when you can actually embrace.
But it should also be taken in a holy way.
The meaning.
No, I don't mean holy in a bad way. I mean that like this is heavy.
This is
Bluntly,
the meaning
we have
of it.
kids who are 14 who are committing carjackings
100%.
in cities and doing bad stuff. And I think if you sent the message to them, if you do a bad crime, you will die, and it will be like this, and that will be you.
But I think it
would be a
tears down.
positive message.
So my argument would be younger people get involved with that because they're around older people who do those things.
I want you to imagine every day, all of a sudden they said, and today, remember that awful the guy that went and shot up a school? Yeah. Because, left hates school shooters, and so do we. But they focus on the gun. I think they're evil. So, you take one of these school shooters, and they say, today we're going to publicly execute this person. And
About
they read
the
off
Super Bowl.
No, the shooters at the Super Bowl thing, and you read off what they did.
Great.
And you don't celebrate it. You just say, look, this is what they did, and if you do this, this will be your fate. Ready, set, go. Boom. End of life. And say
guillotine.
Scared Straight used to be a whole TV show.
No, but
this is Scared Straight for everybody.
Here's a question for anyone that might be, not persuaded. Would crime go up or down?
It would go way down.
Done. So that why is this even a question?
And when it comes to the treatment of prisoners, we have this thing in the United States that you cannot be cruel to prisoners. It's part of the Constitution. And the reason for that is because the government are better than the criminals. It doesn't matter how cruel they've been, we're going to treat them with dignity because we are not like them. Charlie disagreed with that.
We are soft on crime in this country. We need discipline. Honestly, we need the humiliation of criminals. We need order.
Now, a friend of mine went on Facebook and said, hey, if you've been calling Charlie Kirk and other people like him, other people who are into MAGA or who are Republicans, if you've been calling them Nazis, you have a part to play in the death of Charlie Kirk. Because we all know what we should do with Nazis. We've all been conditioned to know that it is righteous to stop Nazis however you need to, particularly if they're going to gain power in the government. They have to be stopped. So if you're calling Trump or Kirk a Nazi, you created the conditions where somebody thought this made sense. And he has a point. I'll note that if you said, hey, Charlie Kirk is a Nazi and Donald Trump is a Nazi and you need to respond peacefully, people may not they may still hold you emotionally responsible for an incident where somebody decides to kill a Nazi. And what comes to mind is Donald Trump saying over and over again, without evidence, that the election was stolen from him and that somebody needed to do something and somebody needed to fight, but they got to fight peacefully, but they really got to go fight. They got to go up to Congress right now. Well, if people are responsible for the death of Charlie Kirk for calling him a Nazi, then I think also Donald Trump might be responsible for what happened on January 6th. And Charlie Kirk is not innocent in this. He used dehumanizing language as well. When you take people's humanity away from them, when you start calling them something other than people, people know what to do. And here's what Charlie Kirk had to say about his political opponents.
And regardless of who the president is, they'll just impeach Trump on the first day. We'll be like, oh, wow, how did this happen? Like, we're dealing with maggots, vermin, and swine here. These are not good people. They're not even a little bit good. They are coming after our throats.
We know what to do with maggots. We know what to do with vermin. It's just as bad as calling somebody a Nazi. This is my main issue with Charlie Kirk when we talk about what a great Christian example he was. In Colossians chapter 4, verse 6, Paul tells believers, "Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." And I don't know that Charlie Kirk was always full of grace and seasoned with salt while he talked to non-Christians, while he talked about people he disagreed with. And it wasn't necessarily a one-time mistake for him. I think there was a pattern of it. Now, what's his legacy? When I think about his legacy, and by all means, I don't get the first pass at writing the rough draft on his life or his legacy. This is just my impression. What I think of is, what's the legacy of Rush Limbaugh? I think Rush Limbaugh and Charlie Kirk have a lot in common. As Rush Limbaugh was to AM radio, to talk radio, that was Charlie Kirk in terms of social media. And Rush Limbaugh has been dead, I don't know, like 5 years now or so. Who's talking about Rush Limbaugh? What was his impact? The last thing I remember about Rush Limbaugh, well, what you need to know about Rush Limbaugh and his message was that he was against federal spending and against the deficit. And he was pro-free speech. Those are two things that really stand out to me. And one of the last memories I have of Rush Limbaugh was that he was at a State of the Union and he was getting the Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump. It's the highest award that can be given to a citizen in the United States. And Donald Trump exploded the national deficit. Knew no end to the end of spending. He spent more than Obama did. In Trump's first 3 years, he spent more than Obama did in his last 6 years. And Trump's fourth year, of course, had COVID. That had something to do with debt as well. There's a new budget that just came out. There's even more spending. More and more spending. And Rush Limbaugh was there, so proud to be getting this award from the man he helped get elected, who disregarded Rush Limbaugh's primary talking point. And now that same guy is disregarding the First Amendment and pushing for the fairness doctrine to be reinstituted, which Rush Limbaugh was totally against. He was the target of the fairness doctrine being reinstated. And now the guy he got elected is out there pushing for it again. What's Rush Limbaugh's legacy? Is anybody reading any of his books anymore? Are people looking up his old clips and listening to his old clips? He was entertaining, for sure. Maybe he got people elected. I don't know. Mostly he was there for entertainment. And I have serious doubts that Turning Point USA is going to continue without Charlie Kirk. His organization was mostly founded and formed around his personality. And his format of going to college campuses and debating people out in the open, I don't know that that's going to continue. I think that anybody who wants to try to do that will just be seen as a Charlie Kirk imposter. They won't be able to do it as well as he did. People will be worried about the public safety threat initially, for sure. They're not likely to show up and participate in that kind of thing anymore. South Park just a month ago did a whole thing about how ridiculous this setup was, how performative it was, how manipulatable it was. I think people are going to be a little bit more savvy about it and not participate in it. Charlie was incredibly smart, but he was not an original thinker. And he was a popularizer, and for sure, so am I. I don't have a lot of original thoughts. I'm bringing to you things I read, and I'm reducing them down in a way that you can get them if you haven't read the book or listened to the whole interview that I listened to. The original thinkers in conservatism and republicanism, they're people like Irving Kristol and William Buckley and for populism, for right-wing populism that Donald Trump believed in and Charlie Kirk were pushing, that would be Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan was the intellectual powerhouse of this movement. It's not Charlie Kirk. We aren't going to read his books in the future. I seriously doubt. And, there's a lot of people who are saying that, well, look at all these people who went to church this last Sunday because of Charlie Kirk. And I remember after 9/11 that there were a lot of people that went to church after that day too. And they weren't there 3 or 4 weeks later. And I see these messages that people are posting. Oh, this guy is now going to church. This guy says he's a believer now because of Charlie Kirk. I believe that there is no bad door into Christianity. Any door you walk into Christianity for is valid. And I hope that you become sanctified and that you get whatever misconceptions about Christianity were presented to you and whatever you were agreeing to. I hope those things get worked out. I read one guy, he said, "This morning I walked into church I'd never heard of, let alone stepped foot in. I prayed with strangers. I cried with people I've never met before. I held hands with them and sang about God. The pastor openly talked about how important our gun rights are, how you cannot legislate against evil, how we cannot be afraid to speak out for fear of consequences from the HR department. He honored and then spoke genuinely about the life and impact of Charlie Kirk for the entire service. It was absolutely amazing. If I told y'all how improbable it was that of all churches I could have chosen to attend for the first time in many, many years, that it would be this one, and that it would be so perfect, you'd believe me when I'd say that God absolutely led me there. He led me back home." Now, I'm all for pastors talking about Charlie Kirk in their services. I think it makes sense. I think it's wise. For the entire service, with a huge emphasis on the need for guns, I am not sure that you went to a church. I'm not sure it's a church about Jesus. I hope it is. I don't know. This is a screenshot of some guy's thing. I don't know if it's true. I don't know the church he went to. I don't know what they're normally like. I've got my doubts about what kind of churches people are finding and how Christ-centered they are if it's around Charlie Kirk's politics. And I think a lot of people are convinced that he was an absolute true Christian and a great example of Christianity because they also have in their mind that his form of politics, that MAGA politics, that MAGA populism, nationalism, are synonymous with Christianity, and they are not. And if you are convinced that nationalism is the same thing as Christianity, then of course you think Charlie Kirk was this amazing Christian. I don't doubt that Charlie Kirk was a Christian at all. I think he did a disservice to a number of people by convincing them that his politics and Christianity were synonymous. And of course he did. We all do that. We all think that our form of politics is what Christianity is leading us to. He's not alone in that. But there's a danger. There's a danger when you get into politics and you intermingle your faith and your politics. And we all just need to be aware of that. And we need to say, hey, this thing I believe about Jesus is far more important than this thing I believe about how much people should be taxed or whether or not we should have a border policy or not. There should be some sort of humility, intellectual humility that separates them in people's minds so they know what we're truly, truly certain about. I read this thing, I think it was from David Bahnsen, and he said, hey, it's been 4 days. That's a little early to be talking about Charlie Kirk's politics and his legacy and all that. I agree. But he said, here's something I want to note. There has been a change in Charlie over the last couple of years. And he was only 31 years old. And Bahnsen said, I've noticed that he's toning it down. He's been toning it down over the last couple of years. and he's maturing. And I have to ask, what would he have been like when he was 51? And we will never know, and that is a tragedy, and I think that is an excellent point. If you had given me a microphone and a platform and $100 million to promote my politics when I was 23 years old, good Lord, I am scared about what I would have said. If you would have told me that the more you ratchet this up and make people angry and afraid, the more viewers you're going to get and the more money you're going to get. I might have said worse things than Charlie Kirk has ever said. I will own that. I am 51 years old. I recognize that what I say now is different than what I was said when I was 31. And Charlie had a tremendous platform, and the true tragedy is that we couldn't hear what he would have become or what he would have said when he was 51 or 71. And I think that what Charlie will be remembered for, he'll first be remembered by his children. And that is beautiful. That is important. That is the most important thing. I hope they're well taken care of. I believe they will be. And I hope that they have plenty of evidence in their lives to remember him and know how much he loved them. The second thing I think that Charlie will truly be known for is that he died. And that is an awful thing, an awful, awful way to be remembered. But his death is a big deal. It's a very, very big deal. And something will happen in American politics because of Charlie Kirk's death. And I pray it is healing and redemptive and beautiful and peaceful. I pray that that's the case, and it's not much worse. But his organization was called Turning Point, and this might be a turning point for our country. And a comparison that comes to mind is John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was not really a successful president. The things he was remembered for are not necessarily political successes or the things he got passed through the legislation. His death was a very big deal in people's memories, in the culture, in our politics. It kicked off 20 years of assassination culture. And it's hard to say that John F. Kennedy's legacy is not in his death. And I think that's also true of Charlie Kirk in all of the worst ways that I could, and all the regretful ways I could ever say that about somebody. I hope it's for peace. I hope it's for redemption. But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know. And let me know why. I had fun and I hope you did too. Bye-bye.
It's the wrong podcast.